2004 में वाजपेयी मुशर्रफ हैंडशेक करके एक जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट भी इशू किए हैं। तो यही मैं कह रहा था कि वो हमारे बहुत बड़ा दुश्मन था, बहुत बड़ा शत्रु था, कारगिल में बहुत नुकसान किया, लेकिन उसके बाद करीब 4 साल के लिए वो बहुत कोशिश की हमारे देश के साथ समाधान करने के लिए।
Was Pakistan's military dictator turned president Pervez Musharraf a real force for peace? Let's look at facts, not faff. The architect of Kargil war, IC-814 hijacked, the attack on the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, the attack on the Indian Parliament, which of course led to Operation Parakram. Indian and Pakistani troops amassed at borders 2002. Well, that's the time we had about 700 casualties, military casualties in Operation Parakram. Pakistan too had casualties, and then there was the Ramzan ceasefire of 2003. Now, this is when the AIOS, or the anti-infiltration obstacle system, or the fence, came up along the line of control. But was this Pakistan's genuine desire for peace, or was Musharraf under intense pressure from the Americans, who threatened to bomb Pakistan to Stone Age if they didn't cooperate? And that is when Pakistan had to remove a couple of divisions from the LOC and shift them to the AFPAC border. So let's look at the real intent of the Pakistanis. But did terror stop even after the attack on the Indian Parliament, even after India gave legitimacy to a military dictator by accepting him as president and giving him a Tri-Services Guard of Honor? Clearly no. There were attacks on Indian temples, whether it was the Akshardham temple or the Raghunath temple in Jammu. Temples very carefully chosen, Hindu faith being targeted. They've targeted the economic centers. Remember, Pakistan repeatedly targets Mumbai because that is the financial capital of India. And even in the so-called period of peace between 2002 and 7, Mumbai was repeatedly targeted. In 2003, Mumbai trains were targeted. In 2006, there was a massive terror attack in which Mumbai's heartline, the nerve, the Mumbai train system was targeted. 200 people died, 800 people were injured. Now the prosecution submitted in court that this was Pakistan's ISI through Lashkar-e-Taiba and Students Islamic Movement of India, SIMI, and Indian Mujahideen. Who does the ISI report to? The army chief, the president, Pervez Musharraf. Was he a real force for peace? Well, he may have claimed to be a real force of peace, but this is what Pakistan was doing. This was 2006. In 2005, again, Delhi markets targeted just before Deepavali. Several deaths took place in serial bomb blasts that took place even in Delhi. 67 people had died. Was he a man of peace? Let's look at facts. Again, there is a lot of conversation about Musharraf's so-called 4-point formula for peace in Jammu and Kashmir. What was this 4-point formula all about? Troop reduction. Because Pakistan had failed. Pervez Musharraf personally had failed at the Siachen Glacier. So let's look at his career and his history. Pervez Musharraf, an SSG commando. 1965 war saw some action in the Khimkaran sector. 71 en route, the SSG was just being prepared, but then the surrender of Dhaka had taken place, so he lost out. He couldn't do anything in 71 war. Well, when he became an SSG commander, he was given the Siachen Brigade. Now, when he was commanding the brigade opposite India in Siachen, that was the time that Pakistan army lost its most important post, which was called the Qaid-e-Azam post. The Jinnah post was lost, and it was Subedar Major, later Honorary Captain Bana Singh, who was awarded a Paramveer Chakra for capturing the Qaid-e-Azam post and establishing the Indian tricolor at one of the most crucial posts on Siachen at that point of time. It was a slap on Musharraf's face. By some accounts, repeated counterattacks were mounted. Pakistan lost more than 200 soldiers in those counterattacks at Bilafondla and that entire area where Pakistan desperately tried for a toehold. Anyway, Musharraf was still promoted, kept on rising in the Pakistan army ranks, but this hurt him. And Kargil was actually revenge for Siachen. So his plan was along 150 kilometers. So, Kaksar, Kargil, Mashko Valley, Batalik, the Pakistani soldiers would intrude. They would cut off the national highway, and they came very close to the national highway. They were dominating the national highway near Dras and very, very closely. And they would cut off Siachen, and India would have no alternative. They would perhaps have to, agree to a mutual withdrawal. That didn't happen because India used fighter jets and heavy artillery. Again, Musharraf may have been a tactically brilliant commander. He didn't have an eye for detail and he did not factor in India's response. So Indian response, and I covered the Kargil war. I stayed in Kargil for 2.5 months covering that war. India used the 155mm howitzers. India used the Mirage 2000s. Of course, India should have gone across and bombed supply chains even in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and bombed the garrisons because Pakistan was the aggressor. But since 1998, nuclear tests had been carried out and we were still, in a different phase. So Musharraf didn't factor in any of this, and India was able to ensure that the Pakistani soldiers went back. Now, what kind of a commander was Musharraf that his soldiers who died on those Kargil heights, he did not even claim those bodies? Listen in to General Y.K. Joshi when he says Indian army had to bury Pakistani soldiers at point 4875, which is now called Batra Top.
Today, we're carrying out the burial of 7 Pakistani soldiers who have laid down their life in combat here as a mark of respect to the soldiers who have died.
But that was just one part of Musharraf's story. So he realized he couldn't get Kargil revenge for Siachen and Kargil. So he came up with this 4-point formula that India and Pakistan will gradually demilitarize or have troop reduction. Where was this troop reduction to take place? At Siachen Glacier. So he wanted somehow to avenge Siachen Glacier and he wanted Indian troops to be out. Are Indian political leaders so naive that they were going ahead with this? And at one point of time, and I did an India Today cover story on this, that India had almost agreed in 2012 to phased withdrawal from the Siachen Glacier and troop reduction. Why? Why are we playing into Pakistan's hands? And that wasn't the only agreement. This 4-point formula was talking about troop reduction. It was talking about self-governance that Kashmiri leaders now so actively talk about. 2 separate units, but self-governance in those units, easy movement. That easy movement would have meant more terrorists coming into Jammu and Kashmir. And why is it when everyone talks about plebiscite or demographic profile, nobody talks about what is happening in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, including in Gilgit and Baltistan? Pakistan has changed the demographic profile of Gilgit and Baltistan, where Shias are now in a majority, and from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, you had a large number of tribals come raid that area and virtually take it over. The amount of Pakistani Punjabi Musalmans who've taken over Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, no leader talks about plebiscite in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and getting the demographic profile restored. Why are all those conditions only for our Kashmir? And this is where the Pakistani leaders repeatedly succeed in pulling wool over India's eyes. Are we so naive? Are we silly? Why do we walk into the Pakistani trap, our eyes wide shut? All of that, of course, changed with the surgical strikes, with action on Article 370, and also with the bombing of Balakot. Because that's perhaps the only language that Pakistan understands. Pakistan is not a party to what's happening in Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan is a party only as far as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan are concerned. And this is where India's economic, military and social strength will be extremely important in ensuring that Pakistan does not control Indian territory in Gilgit-Baltistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir for too long.